Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Reshmina William, and I'm a Senior Project Manager with the ISLE Americas office. Today, I'll be diving into one way that we can operationalize science communication, and specifically how using games and role-playing is a really fantastic way to both humanize and distill down the core concept of what makes your science awesome. Before I get started, a quick shout out to my colleagues from the American Academy for the Advancement of Science, Science, Technology, and Policy Fellowship Program, who generously helped me put together a lot of the content for today's video, which I also presented earlier this year at the AAAS Annual Meeting in Phoenix, Arizona. But now, time for a random bird fact. Did you know that in a single dead tree, an acorn woodpecker can drill as many as 50,000 holes for storing acorns? I certainly didn't. At least not up until a few weeks ago, when a friend of mine pulled out what has become a new favorite of mine, a board game called Wingspan. Now, the fact that I have birds on the brain weeks after a single playthrough of this game is no surprise. Games have been proven time and again to help build both hard knowledge and soft skills. Games like Wingspan and Oceans teach not just #random bird facts, but the core principle of what makes an ecological engine tick over. And games like The Search for Planet X help to illustrate the nuts and bolts of how scientific research gets made, while Ark Nova is a depressingly realistic simulation of how conservation science actually plays out in everyday life. Hint, you run out of money on a very regular basis. But that's not even accounting for the wide range of soft skills that games have been shown to help us hone. Things like communication, stakeholder engagement, negotiation, and improvisation. Needless to say, games do a really great job of teaching us a lot of very useful things. And so we at the Science, Technology, and Policy Fellowship wanted to learn how to teach scientists the best ways to communicate the same information. So my colleagues and I put together a workshop designed to teach scientists why and how to build better games. And we ultimately learned that good game design can really be broken down into three key pillars: simplicity, depth, and story. But what was really wild for me was how closely these three pillars mirror what we see as good scientists and as good science communicators. But more on that later. Let me first spend a little bit of time breaking down these three pillars into their core components, starting with simplicity. The first and most fundamental thing to understand about games is that they're a uniquely shared experience. And that means that you'll always be framing your gameplay experience around the slowest moving piece at the table. Ever had to keep stopping to explain the rules for Monopoly at family game night? Yeah, that. What this means is that you want to frame your design around a singular goal that's easy to understand and to quantify. In other words, how do you know that you've won? And do you have a consistent feedback loop to give your players that information? And finally, remember that a game isn't a simulation. Adding too many elements that you're trying to model just makes your message fuzzy and hard to follow. Now, we want to create depth of play through complex judgments, not complicated goals. Again, remember that we wanted to make it easy for folks to understand that they've won. The complexity lies in how the players actually get there. And there are two main ways that we could add complexity. One is through the threats and the conflicts that are built into the game, and those are the game engines that are how you create nuance and build your game's brand. The second layer of complexity comes from the people at the table. Again, games are a shared medium, and that means that every time you get together to play, the communities that you form really help to build a layered shared story, which is unique and different every single time. Which brings me to my final pillar, which is story. What emotional beats are you trying to capture? A game could be threatening or hopeful. It could be chaotic or controlled. It could be competitive or cooperative. And that sliding scale of emotions is really what allows you to lean into your core messaging. In other words, what themes are you trying to convey? From a learning perspective, the easiest way to do this is start from the most iconic settings and story beats and gradually build on knowledge and complexity. So when you're building a game about birds, like Wingspan, you start off with something that everybody knows. Birds lay eggs. And then you use that concept as a currency to build additional features about the ecosystem in which those birds live and how they interact with each other. As I mentioned earlier on in my talk, these three pillars aren't just about good game design, but ultimately about how we communicate as scientists. We want to build simplicity in how you share your hypothesis, the goal that you're hoping to achieve, and what you want your audience to really take away. You add complexity, depth, and nuance through the scientific process you take to reach that goal, and the care with which you convey that nuance to your audience. And don't forget that story, heart, is at the core of why people should care about your work. And so I'd like to close this presentation by really re-emphasizing the importance of story. Because at their best, games allow us to empathize with cultures and communities that we would otherwise never have had the opportunity to interact with otherwise. In the game Never Alone, the player embodies a little Inupiat girl named Nuna and her Arctic fox companion as they explore the frozen lands of the Alaskan Arctic. The art and the storytelling is very carefully woven with real-life stories told by Inupiat elders, storytellers, and community members, allowing us a unique look inside their lives, their language, and their culture, and a visual reminder of how all of those things are being shaped by an increasingly warming planet. Games allow us to walk in others' shoes in a way that is truly afforded by no other media. As scientists, we have a unique opportunity to use this medium to tell our stories and to share why they matter so much to us.